Next up, we got Malo from the batch changes team here, and he's going to share how we are making batch changes a lot easier to use without needing to drop down to the CLI and also to use it at even larger scale. So over to you, Malo.
All right, my name is Malo. I'm based in Paris, France, and today I'm going to talk about server-side batch changes that we're introducing in 4.0. But first, let me take a step back and give a short introduction to batch changes. So batch changes is a Sourcegraph feature that allows to apply and track code changes across many repositories and code hosts. So if you're working locally on a single repo, you can easily run a refactoring script, or for simple changes, you can use search and replace in your IDE. But what about when you need to make that change across your entire code base, so dozens or hundreds or thousands of repositories? That's when batch changes comes in. And batch changes just allows you to run any code rewrite tool against the entire code base. And you can then manage and track change sets until they get merged. Common examples include things such as changing config files or boilerplate code, or maybe fixing API call sites after you ship a library upgrade, or maybe running your own internal refactoring tool. Changing code at scale requires tons of plumbing, and batch changes mission is to provide a base path for devs to focus on changing code and not on the plumbing, and to avoid all the project management, herding cats, spreadsheet type work you have to do when shipping those changes across the code base. And what we're shipping today as part of 4.0 is server-side batch changes. So when we first built out batch changes, we knew that we wanted this to be a single workflow from search to fix that could let any dev fix code in a few minutes in a very frictionless manner. And we knew that to achieve this, it needed to be running server-side. But we also wanted this to get in the hands of users fast, because we heard from users that this would fix big problems and solve for big challenges they had and save time. And the way to do this was to first let users run batch changes locally on their machine in a client CLI. So that's what we built first. And that was very successful for us. We got dozens of customers and hundreds of users on board. And as we onboarded more of them, we knew we could turn to the next improvement, which was removing the need for running batch changes locally and move that off to the server. And more specifically, build that frictionless, very easy to use and scalable experience that could cater to any enterprise scale user. And now let's jump into a quick demo. So I'm working on Go code, and I want to make sure that we use the most efficient way to convert ints to string in Go. So there are many ways to do this, but format.sprnf is less efficient than stringconf.i2a. So I'll start from a search, like where is this in my code base? So using structural search, I can identify the footprint of this. So this is in many repos. So there I have kind of two options. I could fix this once in a single repo manually or open a bunch of PRs. Or I could use batch changes, which provides this much better base path. And in the rest of this demo, I will show the new server-side workflow. So let me create a batch change to fix this. So in this new experience, I get this online editor with autocomplete. I get templates on the left-hand side. So here, I'm just going to use a spec I've prepared in advance. And I can preview all the repositories that I'm going to change on the right-hand side. So if I want to iterate on this and there are some repositories I want to exclude, I can do this in a few clicks from this UI. When I'm ready, I can click Run Batch Spec. And this is where the magic happens. So instead of running locally, this is now offloaded to what we call executors, that are a little bit like CI agents that run alongside the Sourcegraph instance. And those executors can be autoscaled in the background. So this can cater to hundreds or thousands of repositories, any scale essentially. One cool thing about this workflow is instead of waiting for the full batch change to complete to get feedback, you get streamed logs and diffs as soon as they're processed. So for example, if I realize I need to tune my batch spec because something's going wrong, I can just edit the batch spec and run this again. So very convenient way to iterate faster on spec and make sure I get to the result I want in the shortest amount of time possible. So when all of this completes, I'll be able to preview this batch change. And check the diffs that were created one last time before committing this to the instance. And once that's done, I'll apply this and go back to my usual dashboard to track change sets until they get merged. And that's the demo. Quinn, what do you think?
I think it's awesome. And so do our customers from some of the feedback on this already. What are some of the most interesting ways we've seen customers use batch changes on their code?
Yeah, so the cool thing about this feature, I think, is there are so many ways. But the one most impressive way I've seen it used is those platform teams that ship internal library upgrades have big problems in getting those projects across the finish line because they have to ask, potentially hundreds or thousands of downstream repo owners to go fix their API call sites. And batch changes has been used many times to ship the library upgrade alongside API call site fixes. So those big cumbersome projects requiring tons of coordination are now automated. And this is truly impressive to me because it saves tons of time to everybody.
Cool. And folks can put questions in the chat. It can be pretty scary to click a big button that makes changes to hundreds or thousands of repos. So what does batch changes do to make that less scary?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's several steps in the workflow that make it less scary. You can preview what's going to happen at multiple stages. So when you run the batch change, you can preview the diffs. When you preview, you have a chance to review everything. And then the change sets aren't published necessarily all at the same time. You can select the one you want to publish or publish them all. So there are many different ways you can catch mistakes, have this reviewed by your team, and make sure that you get to success. Lastly, if you realize you made a mistake, the spec model is declarative. So you can change the spec, reapply it, and fix the PRs you've opened.
Cool. So if some dev works at a company and they're not doing these kind of large-scale changes right now, like what do they need to do to start doing it? It seems like it's a big culture change, a bunch of new tools set up. They need to know what kind of changes to run. How do they even get started?
Yeah, so that's also a great question. And there's always a dev doing some kind of change across many repos in every company. It's just that they're using their own script or building some tooling that they have to fix every time they want to use it. So that's
or maybe they're just making a bunch of Jira tickets and hoping that things happen and nothing actually happens, right?
Right. So that's common. But yeah, a good way to get started is we have a bunch of templates and a repository with common use cases. And that's where you can find resources to get started and start pushing this change.
Cool. So server-side batch changes, does this work on cloud and self-hosted?
Yeah, server-side batch changes is available to self-hosted customers, so they can install executors that power this alongside their instance, and also available by default, hosted by Sourcegraph for any cloud customer. So no setup here.
Awesome. All right, and there's a question in the chat. Why not just use something like Dependabot?
Yeah, so Dependabot is very focused on things such as upgrading dependencies, right? So that's something it's good at. Batch changes is great for executing any code change, so arbitrary code changes against the code base. So Dependabot is not going to be very helpful if you do things such as, changing Terraform code or upgrading boilerplate. That's something you need a more generic tool to use. So you don't want to have like dozens of tools for each use case. And that's where batch changes comes in. It's a single workflow to handle it all.
Yeah. And you can also actually rewrite call sites to upgrade to a new API. You can do it for internal libraries in Dependabot. You can make sure that right now you've upgraded everyone instead of having it be eventually consistent. So it gives you a ton more flexibility. There's another related question here, which is, can you use batch changes on open source code to auto fix problems for open source maintainers?
Yeah, this is not available yet, but we'd love to get there and provide those fixes to the open source world.
Yeah, it's a really exciting thing that we could do, but we got to figure out how people would opt into these and so on. The last thing we want to do is, send a bunch of spam PRs out. Cool. All right. Can you share what else is coming next in batch changes?
Yeah, we have two upcoming things on the roadmap. The first one is as you handle those many PRs that you're managing, making it even more seamless to make sure they get merged and making sure we can flag maybe interesting PRs that need input from the batch change creator in the UI. And the second thing is, how do we make it super simple, as you said, to get started with batch changes if you don't have that culture? So to do that, we're trying to abstract some simple changes and also to provide a big library of batch change specs you can just use, and also make sure that inside a company you can easily share those specs once you've built them, so that people can reuse that knowledge and that tooling.
Yeah, cool. And there's a follow-up question, which is, but does batch changes actually check in the background, like Dependabot, for updates? And Malo, do you want to take that and how server-side batch changes will finally make that possible in the future?
Yeah, so Sourcegraph has many building blocks that lead to this. So another feature that is available today in Sourcegraph is code monitoring. So you can create alerts based on what's going on in your code base. So maybe this version is out of date or this new change has been introduced. And based on that, in the very near future, you can trigger batch changes. So if a bad code pattern or maybe a new version is introduced, you can just auto fix it. So that's part of the future roadmap and where we are going next.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Malo. And